Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to get into something that, well, it feels small at first glance, almost quaint.
Right, like a nice garden scene.
Exactly. You picture a bee buzzing around your yard, or maybe a butterfly landing on a window box. It's a nice image. But we're going to pull back the curtain today to reveal something massive, slightly terrifying, but ultimately incredibly important about the way our world is built.
Yeah, because we aren't just talking about bugs today.
No, we are talking about architecture.
It's one of those topics where you think you know the story. You think, okay, save the bees, plant some flowers, maybe don't spray too much weed killer.
Like a bumper sticker campaign.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Feels like a bumper sticker. But when you really look at the data, when you look at the structural reality of what is actually happening out there, it is not just about a single insect species having a bad year.
Right.
It is about the collapse of a biological support system, the system that keeps us alive.
And I want to set the stage right away for you listening. We aren't just riffing here. We aren't just pulling headlines off social media. We have a very specific, incredibly dense set of source materials for this deep dive.
We do.
We are drawing the absolute core of today's discussion from a collection called Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf.
Which is a fascinating and, frankly, somewhat haunting curation of sources.
Haunting is the right word.
It really forces you to look at the environment not as a collection of separate objects, not like, oh, there's a tree here, a river there, a cloud up there, but as this invisible chemical architecture that connects everything.
That phrase right there, invisible chemical architecture, that is our mission today.
Yeah.
We want to uncover that architecture. We want to look at the sky, the water, and the soil, and understand how the world we have built is fundamentally reshaping the world of the pollinator. Because, let's be honest, the stakes are high.
They're astronomical.
Why should you care if a bee has a hard time finding a flower?
Because if we just look at the raw numbers, pollinators support approximately 3/4 of all flowering plant species on Earth.
3/4.
3/4. And for us humans, strictly speaking about our pantry and what we eat, they support over 1/3 of global food crops. So if this system goes down, it's not just that your garden looks a little sad.
Or that you don't get pretty flowers on your walk.
Right. The food web fundamentally breaks.
But we're talking no coffee, no chocolate, no almonds, apples.
The list is long and depressing. But the thesis we are exploring today, based on these sources from Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf, goes way beyond just the idea that we need food.
Right.
It posits that we are at a threshold. I found this concept really gripping in the reading.
Same here.
The idea is that the decline we are seeing isn't just bad luck. It isn't just a couple of weird weather seasons. It is a fundamental mismatch.
A mismatch between the biology and the world we built.
Exactly. It is a mismatch between biology and industry. You have pollinators, bees, butterflies, moths, bats. They evolved over millions of years in complex, diverse, messy ecosystems.
Very messy.
They are tuned to a specific frequency of nature. And now they are trying to survive in a world that we have engineered to be incredibly streamlined, chemically managed, and efficient.
And that friction is where the collapse happens?
That's the friction.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think when people hear the word decline, they think, well, nature fluctuates.
Yeah, boom and bust cycles.
Right. Some years are hot, some are cold, populations go up and down. I remember as a kid there were years with tons of ladybugs and years with almost none. But our sources make a really important distinction between fluctuation and structural decline.
That is the key distinction. If you look at honeybees, for example, those are essentially livestock.
Like cows or chickens.
Basically, we manage them. Their numbers fluctuate year to year based on management, weather, diseases, and honestly, how many replacement boxes beekeepers buy. But when we look at native bees, the wild ones that don't live in white boxes, or when we look at the monarch butterfly, we aren't seeing a fluctuation.
We're seeing a trend.
We are seeing a downward slope. Consistent, measurable loss of biomass over decades.
The monarch example in the notes from Echoes from the Edge really stood out to me. It mentioned the migration narrowing. Can you explain that mechanism?
It's a tragedy of geometry, almost. The monarch migration is this massive, epic biological phenomenon, right? Scanning thousands of miles from Mexico up into Canada.
It's incredible.
But because of the widespread use of herbicides in the American Midwest, we have effectively eliminated milkweed from huge swaths of the landscape.
And milkweed is non-negotiable for them.
It is the only plant monarch caterpillars can eat, period. If there is no milkweed, there are no monarchs. It is literally that simple.
Wow.
So because we have these incredibly efficient herbicides that wipe out everything except the cash crop, we've created a food desert. You have habitat loss driving them into smaller and smaller corridors.
It's like trying to drive across the country, but someone has removed 90% of the gas stations.
That's a great way to put it. Eventually, you run out of fuel.
And this brings us to what the source calls the 1-2 punch, or really the multiplier effect. This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah, it gets complicated here.
Because I usually think of chemicals as binary. You spray the bug dies, end of story. But the source material suggests it is way more nuanced and darker than that.
Much more nuanced and honestly much more insidious. The material from echoes from the edge creates this argument that the chemical load amplifies other stressors. It's rarely just one thing that kills a bee instantly. It's that the chemical makes everything else harder to survive.
So talk to me about sublethal exposure, because that sounds like military jargon, but I know it's crucial here.
It is the whole ballgame. Sublethal means the dose didn't kill you right away. Imagine you are a bee. You get exposed to a pesticide or maybe a fungicide out in an orchard.
Right.
You don't drop dead, you fly back to the hive. But your immune system takes a massive hit. It is deeply compromised. Now, in a normal, healthy life, you might encounter a parasite.
Sure.
Wild bees get parasites all the time. Usually they can fight it off.
But because you've had that chemical exposure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because your system is already fighting the toxin, the parasite moves from being a nuisance to being lethal. The chemical basically opens the door for the invader.
It's like, okay, analogy time. It's like if I'm running a marathon, if I catch a little cold while I'm training, I might be okay. I can push through. But if I'm running a marathon and I have a cold and someone has just poisoned my water bottle and I haven't eaten in 3 days.
That is the structural decline right there. That is a very accurate, if slightly dark, analogy.
It paints the picture.
It does. But you hit on the third point there, haven't eaten 3 days.
Right.
That is the habitat link. Herbicides are designed to kill weeds. But to a bee, a weed is lunch. A weed is forage. Clover, dandelion, creeping Charlie, these are vital food sources. So we have simplified the habitat, making food incredibly hard to find.
So they're starving.
A hungry bee is a weak bee. And a weak bee cannot handle the chemical exposure.
It really is a death by 1,000 cuts. It's not one villain twirling a mustache. It's the whole system working against them.
It is. And it creates a systemic failure. We have created inputs, pesticides, herbicides designed for agricultural efficiency. And they work.
Yeah.
They are very efficient at what they do.
Yeah, they kill what they're supposed to kill.
But they create a vulnerability in the background system that sustains the whole operation. It's a multiplier effect where 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 10.
I want to drill down a bit deeper on the mechanics of this because the Lone Wolf notes mention something specific about the gut. We hear about gut health for humans all the time. You know, eat your yogurt, take your probiotics.
Right.
Does a bee have a gut biome?
They absolutely do. And this is a fascinating frontier of research. Bees rely on a highly specific set of bacteria in their gut to digest pollen and to regulate their immune system.
Just like us.
Very similar. Now, here is the kicker. Some herbicides, specifically glyphosate, which is the most common weed killer in the world, work by disrupting a specific enzyme pathway in plants.
Okay, so it stops the plant from growing.
Right. But it turns out that exact same enzyme pathway exists in some bacteria and fungi. Animals don't have it, which is why we were told it was safe for us.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The bacteria in the bee's gut do have it. So when a bee ingests nectar with traces of this herbicide, it acts like a potent antibiotic.
It wipes out their stomach.
It wipes out the beneficial bacteria. So now you have a bee that can't digest its food properly and has a completely compromised immune system. It's starving with a full stomach.
That is awful.
And that is exactly why a pathogen that used to be harmless suddenly wipes out an entire colony.
That is, well, it completely changes how you look at a bottle of weed killer on the hardware store shelf, doesn't it? It's not just drying up a leaf. It's acting on a microscopic level inside the insects.
It is fundamentally changing the biological terrain.
So we have established the biological stress. Now I want to pivot to the environment itself, because the sources take us on this tour of the elements: air, water, soil. And reading through this, I swear I will never look at the sky the same way again.
It's a paradigm shift.
Let's talk about the chemical atmosphere.
This is one of the most profound shifts in perspective offered by echoes from the edge. Historically and biologically, the air was just a medium. It was neutral.
It was just empty space.
Right. It carried the wind, it carried scent, it carried the changing of the seasons. It was just empty space that you moved through.
And now?
Now, the air is a carrier system. It carries the residues of industrialization, combustion byproducts, and yes, agricultural chemistry. It is thick with invisible traffic.
This concept of drift is something we hear about, but I don't think we realize the scale of it. The source mentions that particles travel miles.
Miles and miles. This is the ultimate issue with boundaries. Humans love boundaries. We have fences, we have property lines, we have drawn maps.
This is my yard, that's your yard.
Exactly. We think I'm spraying my garden or my farm field, and it stays here because this is my land.
Right.
Physics does not care about your property line. Physics cares about wind shear and thermal columns. Drift is real. Pesticide particles get picked up by the wind, and they settle into wild habitats, into nature preserves, into your neighbor's organic vegetable patch.
So there really is no such thing as an isolated event when you were spraying something into the air.
Precisely. If it is in the air, it is everywhere. But here is the part that I found most fascinating, and it connects directly back to the lone wolf sources. It's the concept of the erased map.
Yes. This was a total aha moment for me.
It's mind-blowing.
Because I never really thought about how a bee actually finds a flower. I just assumed they, I don't know, saw it. Like, oh, there's a yellow thing over there, let's go.
They do use vision, especially when they get really close. But scent is their long-range radar. Flowers emit incredibly complex scent molecules, volatile organic compounds.
Okay.
These form a trail in the air, almost like a plume of smoke. A bee picks up that scent and flies upwind, following the concentration gradient to the source. It is literally a map made of smell.
And we are erasing it.
We are actively scrubbing it out. Air pollution, specifically ozone and particulate matter from car exhaust and factory emissions, chemically reacts with those fragile scent molecules. It degrades them. It literally breaks the molecule apart in midair.
So the flower is screaming, hey, I'm here, but the air is muffling the sound.
Exactly. The flower is still pumping out the scent, doing its job, but the signal degrades before it can travel very far. It creates this shrinking radius of confusion.
So go back to my map analogy. It's like I'm driving, trying to follow a physical map to a restaurant, but the ink is fading away right in front of my eyes.
That's a perfect analogy. Or imagine trying to hear someone whisper a secret to you in a crowded, booming nightclub. The signal is technically there, but the chemical noise is overwhelming.
Wow.
And think about the energy cost here. This is the critical part to understand. If the scent trail is strong, the bee flies straight from the hive to the food, efficient, boom, boom, boom.
Right.
If the trail is broken or artificially short, the bee has to fly longer, search much harder, and burn significantly more calories just to find the exact same amount of food.
And remember, this is a bee that is arguably already immune-compromised and hungry from the habitat loss we talked about in Section 1.
Right. You're stacking the deck against them. It forces the whole system into a massive energy deficit. The bee is working harder for less return.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And that leads to colony collapse or failure to reproduce. It is not that they drop dead mid-flight from exhaustion. It's that they run out of gas, metaphorically and literally. They simply cannot gather enough net energy to sustain the next generation.
And it's not just the stuff floating around them in the air. The source talks about systemic absorption. This is the stuff inside the plant.
This is a newer class of challenge in the chemical landscape. Systemic pesticides, like the neonicotinoids we hear so much about in the news, are designed to be absorbed by the plant itself.
Okay.
They are water-soluble. You treat the seed before planting, or you drench the soil, and the plant sucks it up as it grows. It makes the plant itself toxic to pests, which, from an engineering standpoint, sounds great for pest control. Bug bites the leaf, bug dies.
But the bee isn't biting the leaf, it's taking the nectar.
Correct. But because the chemical is systemic, meaning it has permeated every single cell of the plant, it ends up in the pollen and the nectar too.
So the food itself is medicated.
Yeah, the food is contaminated. The very reward the flower offers to the pollinator is spiked. And again, it's usually not a lethal dose instantly. It creates what the sources describe as a gradual erosion.
What does that look like?
It affects their orientation. They get lost and can't find their way back to the hive. It affects their reproduction. It drastically affects their behavioral stability. They stop acting like bees. They become lethargic or confused, or they stop grooming themselves.
It is wild to think about the sky and the flower itself becoming hostile territory.
Right.
We tend to think of nature as this benevolent, safe backdrop, but we've inadvertently turned it into an invisible obstacle course.
We have.
But we have to keep moving through the elements because gravity takes everything down eventually. And where does it all go? It goes to the water.
The memory of water.
Yes. That is such a poetic line from the source material. Water holds the memory. It sounds almost like something from a fantasy novel, but what does that actually mean in a hard scientific context?
It means that water is the ultimate solvent and the ultimate transport system on this planet. The water cycle: evaporation, condensation, rain is a giant redistribution engine.
Right.
Rain falls, it hits the ground.
And it picks up whatever we left there.
Exactly. It gathers whatever we have put on the surface.
On our suburban lawns and massive farm fields.
Correct. And plants can only absorb so much. They aren't infinite sponges. They can take up endless water and nutrients.
Right, there's a limit.
The excess, it dissolves into the runoff. It flows into the storm drains, the creeks, the rivers, the lakes. And we see the result constantly. Algal blooms. You've definitely seen these, those bright green, neon, toxic-looking scums on ponds in late summer.
Yeah, they look terrible. And I know they kill fish because they suck the oxygen out of the water. They create these massive dead zones. But how does this connect to the bees? I don't usually see bees swimming in the lake.
This is the connection we often miss. And Echoes from the Edge does a phenomenal job of highlighting this aquatic-terrestrial link. Think about aquatic insects for a second.
Okay.
Dragonflies, mayflies, caddisflies, they spend their larval stages, their childhoods, basically entirely underwater.
Right, dragonfly nymphs look like little armored aliens crawling around underwater.
They do. They're fierce little predators. But when the water chemistry gets thrown completely off balance by our runoff, by the nitrates, the phosphates, the pesticide residues, those insect populations crash. The water becomes unlivable for them.
Okay, I'm with you. The dragonflies die, but stick with the bees for me.
It's all about the web. Aquatic insects are the foundational base of the food web for many birds, amphibians, and other predators. When they decline, the birds decline. When the ecosystem immediately around the water suffers, the terrestrial species, including our pollinators, suffer.
The ripple effect.
Yes, but there is actually a much more direct physical link. Bees drink water.
They do. I guess I just never really thought about a bee being thirsty. I always picture them drinking nectar.
Absolutely, they drink water. Honeybees, in particular, need significant amounts of water. They use it to cool their hives.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they actually engage in evaporative cooling. They bring water droplets back, spread them around, and then fan their wings over the water to air condition the hive on hot days.
That is incredibly smart.
And they also need it to dilute stored honey so they can actually eat it. Sometimes honey gets too thick or crystallized to metabolize directly.
Okay, what about butterflies?
Butterflies engage in a behavior called mud puddling. You might have seen this on a hike. It's when a group of butterflies gathers on a damp patch of dirt or mud.
Yeah, I've seen that.
They aren't just hanging out socializing. They are actively drinking the water from the soil to extract vital minerals and salts. They desperately need those nutrients, especially for reproduction.
So if that water source, that mud puddle or that shallow creek bank, is basically a concentrated chemical cocktail of agricultural and lawn runoff.
Then the water hole becomes a trap. It becomes another cumulative exposure pathway. They are actively drinking the very chemicals that drifted through the air or washed off the field miles away.
Plants!
They are getting it from the air, they are getting it from the nectar, and now they are getting it straight from their water cooler.
It feels incredibly heavy, doesn't it? The air is blocking their senses, the food is spiked, and the water is contaminated.
It paints a bleak picture.
But the source material for this deep dive, Echoes from the Edge, didn't just leave us in the dumps. It talked about the regenerative capacity of water. There's a way out of this section.
Yes, and this is so important to emphasize. Water is incredibly resilient. If you stop the source of the continuous pollution, water clears. It wants to be clean. The source mentions wetlands specifically. Wetlands are nature's kidneys. They filter contaminants.
How specifically do wetlands filter contaminants? Is it just that the water sits there and things settle?
It's a highly active filtration process. Wetlands are incredibly biologically active zones. You have plants like cattails, reeds, and sedges. Their root systems are dense.
Okay.
First, they physically slow the moving water down. When water slows down, the suspended sediment, the dirt particles, drops out of the water column. It settles to the bottom.
And a lot of chemicals are attached to the dirt.
Exactly. Phosphorus and many common pesticides bind aggressively to sediment particles. So just by physically slowing the water, you trap a huge percentage of the chemicals in the mud.
Okay, so it physically traps the bad stuff.
But then the microbes take over. The bacteria living in the root zones of those wetland plants can actually break down some of these complex synthetic chemicals.
Really?
Yeah, they eat them. They disassemble the hydrocarbon chains of the pesticides and turn them into simple, less harmful byproducts. It's called bioremediation.
That is amazing. Nature basically has its own hazmat team on standby.
It does. But the team can be easily overwhelmed. If we dump too much too fast, the system crashes. But if we deliberately create buffer zones, riparian plantings along riverbanks, we give the hazmat team a chance to work.
Just giving them space.
This is exactly why the source emphasizes buffer regulations. If you require farmers or real estate developers to leave a 50-foot strip of native wild vegetation between their project and the creek, you reduce the chemical load entering the water by a massive percentage.
It's such a simple structural fix. It doesn't require some new Silicon Valley technology. It doesn't require a robot. It just requires space.
Space and a fundamental respect for the function of the land.
Okay, so we've done air, we've done water. Now we have to go down to the absolute foundation, the soil.
The bedrock of it all.
And honestly, this was the section that surprised me the most in the reading. Because I admit, I treat dirt like, well, like dirt. It's just the stuff you stand on. It's the stuff you scrub off your shoes before you come inside.
And that is the fundamental mistake we all make in modern society. And the host in the source notes clarifies this distinction beautifully. Dirt is dead. Soil is living infrastructure.
Living infrastructure. I love that term. It sounds very high-tech.
It is the highest tech we have on the planet. Consider the stats for a second. A single teaspoon of healthy soil contains billions of microorganisms.
Billions in a teaspoon.
Billions. Bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa. It is a bustling microscopic metropolis down there. It is structurally more complex than New York City, all contained in a teaspoon.
And the plants above ground are plugged right into this, right? It's not just that the roots are sitting passively in the dirt to keep the plant from falling over. They are actively communicating.
They are trading. This is the ancient symbiotic relationship that literally built the biosphere as we know it. Plants produce sugars through photosynthesis. They capture sunlight and turn it into carbon-based energy.
Right.
Then they send a significant portion of those hard-earned sugars down into their roots, not to use for themselves, but to feed the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil.
They are literally paying the fungi.
It's an absolute transaction.
Yeah.
In exchange, the fungi, which have these massive microscopic web networks that extend way, way beyond the plant's own physical roots, scavenge the soil for water and vital nutrients like phosphorus and zinc.
Wow.
They bring those raw materials back to the plant root and trade them for the sugar. It is a perfect barter system.
But then we come along with our synthetic fertilizers.
Enter the lazy plant syndrome.
I love this concept.
It's so descriptive. When we dump highly soluble synthetic fertilizers on the soil, that blue powder or liquid you buy at the big box hardware store, we are essentially giving the plant fast food.
Right.
It is a flood of free, easy nutrients.
Right.
The plant takes it up with zero effort. It doesn't have to work for it.
So the plant thinks, why should I waste my incredibly expensive sugar paying the fungi when I can just suck up this free nitrogen right here?
Exactly. The plant acts rationally from an energy standpoint.
Right.
It abruptly stops feeding the fungi. It completely cuts off the trade route, and because of that, the partnership breaks down. The fungi starve and die off. The microbial diversity crashes.
The city dies?
The city dies. The soil turns from a living, breathing infrastructure into, well, just dirt. It becomes a sterile, inert medium that basically just holds the plant upright.
It radically simplifies the system.
And a simplified biological system is inherently a fragile system.
Right.
It becomes what agronomists call addicted. Since the natural nutrient cycling is totally broken because the microbes are dead, the only way the plant can ever eat again is if you feed it from the synthetic bag.
You're locked in.
You can never stop. You have to buy more fertilizer every single year. It is literally an addiction model.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If I'm a farmer, or even just the backyard gardener, and I give the plant this fertilizer, and it grows huge, beautiful red tomatoes, why do I care if the soil is addicted? I'm getting my tomatoes. The bee sees a giant flower. What's the problem?
The bee absolutely cares, even if it doesn't know why. This brings us to a terrifying concept, the nutritional deficit. Plants grown in degraded, simplified, chemically dependent soil produce pollen and nectar that has an altered, degraded nutritional profile.
It's the hidden hunger.
That's the exact term used in the source material. The flower looks exactly the same. It's yellow, it's bright, it has big petals, it looks like food. But the crude protein content in the pollen might be drastically lower.
So it's an illusion.
Exactly. The vital micronutrients, things like specific sterols and lipids that bees need to survive, might be completely missing because the fungi weren't there in the soil to fetch them and bring them to the plant.
So it's literally junk food.
It's empty calories. We actually have robust data showing that the mineral content of our own fruits and vegetables, human food, has declined significantly over the last 50 years. We are eating diluted food,
That's alarming.
and the pollinators are eating diluted pollen.
It compounds the whole problem. We talked earlier about the bee being weak from chemical exposure and hungry from habitat loss. Now we learn that even when it finally finds a flower, that food is essentially wonder bread.
Wonder bread is a great way to put it, and it compounds across generations.
Yeah.
If the bee larvae in the hive are fed poor quality, low protein pollen, they grow up to be smaller, weaker adult bees.
Right.
Those weaker adults are then less effective at foraging, they lay fewer eggs, they die sooner, and the spiral just continues downward.
And we can't ignore the physical structure of the soil itself either. The source mentioned herbicides and roots.
Right. When we use broad-spectrum herbicides to chemically kill absolutely everything except the chosen crop, we eliminate root diversity in the ground.
Because there's only one type of plant left.
Exactly. Different wild plants have radically different root structures. Some have deep, thick taproots that break up hardpan. Some have fine, fibrous networks at the surface. This physical diversity keeps the soil open, aerated, and porous. Keeps it spongy.
Like a literal sponge.
When you enforce a strict monoculture, you only have one single type of root. The soil naturally compacts over time. It becomes physically and biologically thin. It loses its critical ability to absorb and hold rainwater.
It sounds like we have systematically dismantled the entire life support system from the bottom up. We've broken the ancient soil barter system, we've poisoned the local water hole, and we've fogged up the navigational map in the air.
We have. And that is exactly why the central thesis of this deep dive is that we are at a threshold. It is not just about planting a few extra marigolds by the mailbox.
Right.
It is about recognizing that the way we manage land on a macro scale, from the massive industrial farm all the way down to the perfectly manicured suburban front lawn, is actively fighting against the biology that sustains us. We are fighting the architecture.
And there is a very big but coming here.
Yes, thank you.
We are not just here to deliver an hour of bad news and send everyone to bed deeply depressed. The source material, Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf, pivots really hard in the final chapters to the turnaround. It talks extensively about regeneration.
And thank goodness it does. Because there are real, workable solutions. And they are actually happening right now. It is not a hopeless end-of-the-world situation. It is a management situation.
Let's start with the big picture then. The macro solution. Regenerative agriculture. We hear this buzzword thrown around a lot lately, but what does it actually mean in the context of our pollinators?
This is the rapidly growing counter-movement to the purely industrial chemical model. And look, we have to acknowledge a hard truth first. Industrial agriculture brought us incredible efficiency and massive yields.
It fed a booming global population.
It did. We can't just wave a hand and say it was all evil or all bad. But it came at a staggering ecological cost that we are only now starting to pay. Regenerative agriculture tries to thread the needle. It tries to keep the productivity up, but fundamentally restore the biological function beneath it.
So what does that actually look like in practice? If I'm driving my car past a genuinely regenerative farm, what do I see out the window?
You see diversity, first and foremost. Instead of hundreds and hundreds of acres of just bare dirt or just corn, you see complex crop rotations.
Okay.
You see cover crops. This is huge. Planting something like rye or vetch or clover in the off-season just to feed the soil biology during the winter, not to harvest and sell.
Keeping the soil armored.
Exactly. Keeping a living root in the ground at all times. You also see integrated pest management where the farmer deliberately uses predatory insects and natural ecological balances to handle pests instead of just reflexively spraying a broad-spectrum neurotoxin over the whole field.
And the ultimate goal is to rebuild that soil carbon, to get the underground fungal economy working again.
That's the whole game. The goal is to intensely feed the soil biology so that the soil biology goes back to feeding the plant. And the pilot programs, the real leaders in this field, are clearly showing that it works.
That's the hopeful part.
This isn't just some utopian fantasy. It's a pragmatic shift in economic incentives. High productivity can be maintained while rebuilding the ecosystem. Farmers are practical business people. If their topsoil dies and blows away, their multi-generational business dies. So there is a very real, intense economic push to figure this out.
Okay, that covers the farmers. That's the big industry. And obviously, we should support that with how we choose to buy our food.
Yeah.
But most of you listening right now aren't actively managing 5,000 acres of soybeans.
Probably not.
You might have a backyard or a tiny apartment balcony or just a little grass strip by the sidewalk. This is where the micro solution comes in. The source calls it the garden as living infrastructure.
I think this is arguably the most empowering part of the entire deep dive. We all tend to think our own little patch of grass doesn't really matter in the grand scheme. We think, well, I'm just one person. What difference does my yard make?
Right.
But Echoes from the Edge makes the very strong point that ecosystems don't work like that. They function through massive accumulation.
One bloom feeds one bee. 100 gardens sustain a population.
That's the biological math right there. If you shift your mindset and view your garden not as a static decoration, not as a pretty painting to just be looked at, but as critical infrastructure, as a literal service station for native wildlife, you completely change how you manage it.
So what is the actionable advice here for the listener? What did the Lone Wolf sources tell us to actually go out and do this weekend?
First rule, above all else, native plants. This is the golden rule. Ornamental plants imported from other continents, your standard hostas, your daylilies are often very pretty, and they are usually tough to kill, but they might not provide the right nectar or pollen for your local bees.
It's like serving them plastic fruit.
Often, yes. Native plants and local pollinators evolved together over millennia. They fit together biologically like a lock and key.
So the local bee physically has the right tongue length for the local flower shape?
Exactly. And the local caterpillar has the specific digestive enzymes required to eat the local leaf without getting sick. It is a perfectly matched set.
Okay, so plant native plants. What else?
Avoid all synthetic lawn chemicals. We just spent the last half hour explaining exactly why they are so destructive. The multiplier effect, the destruction of the gut biome, the toxic water runoff. Just stop using them entirely.
Just let it go?
If you have a few dandelions pop up, it is not the end of the world. In fact, dandelions are often the very first abundant food source available in early spring for incredibly hungry, desperate bees waking up from winter.
I've actually started seeing people in my neighborhood do no mow May, which is pretty cool, just letting the lawn get a little wild and shaggy for a month.
That's brilliant, and it leads into the third point from the source. Deliberately leave portions of your land slightly wild. It creates essential refuge points.
Refuge points.
Bees need secure places to nest and overwinter. Most native bees don't live in giant communal hives like honeybees. They are solitary. They live in the ground. They nest in messy, overgrown grass, in the hollow, dried stems of old winter plants, in patches of bare, undisturbed soil.
So if your garden is perfectly manicured, aggressively raked, and covered in 2 inches of dyed wood mulch,
There's literally nowhere for them to live. You are running a beautiful hotel with a great restaurant, but you locked all the bedroom doors.
that's a great image. And the source also mentioned providing water, shallow water specifically. Now, I've seen people on the internet put out bowls of sugar water. Is that what we are talking about here?
No, that's a really important distinction to make. We are talking about plain, natural water. Leaving out bowls of sugar water can sometimes rapidly spread diseases between bees if the bowl isn't sanitized constantly, and it can actually distract bees from foraging real flowers, which defeats the purpose of pollination.
Makes sense.
We want them actively pollinating the ecosystem, not just hitting the artificial syrup bottle on your porch. The absolute best thing you can do is create a mud puddle simulation.
How do I build a mud puddle simulation?
It's incredibly low tech. You get a shallow plant saucer, you put some clean dirt in it, you put some water in it to make it muddy, maybe toss in a few flat stones or sticks for them to land on safely so they don't accidentally drown. That's literally it.
Just a muddy plate.
Just a muddy plate. Butterflies, specifically, desperately need the minerals from that soil. Like we talked about, they aren't just thirsty for a drink. They are actively mining the mud for salt and reproductive nutrients.
So a messy, muddy saucer on the ground is actually better for them than a pristine, deep, chlorinated bird bath.
For a butterfly or a small bee, absolutely, every single time.
I love the visualization the source gives next. It talks about creating corridors of resistance. That sounds like a sci-fi rebellion.
It's a very powerful, very deliberate image. Imagine looking down at your entire neighborhood from a drone or an airplane. Right now, it probably looks like a rigid grid of green, chemically treated, sterile lawns.
Just miles of green carpet.
Biological deserts. But if you decide to plant a dense native patch in your yard, and your neighbor 2 houses down plants one, and someone across the street stops spraying chemicals, suddenly you have a corridor. You have stepping stones.
It connects the isolated patches? Because I live in a pretty dense city. I don't have a farm. Can a concrete city really function as a biological corridor?
Cities are actually becoming surprisingly vitally important for pollinator survival. Think about the landscape. Rural areas are often vast, unbroken monocultures of corn or soy. They are toxic food deserts for wild bees, as we discussed.
Right.
But cities inherently have gardens, diverse public parks, balcony planters, vacant lots with weeds, and a distinct lack of crop-dusting airplanes. There's actually massive floral diversity packed into a city.
So cities can actually be the refuge.
They can absolutely be the life raft.
Yeah.
But only if we actively connect the dots. A large honeybee might be able to fly a few miles to find food, but a tiny native sweat bee might only have a flight range of a few hundred yards.
Oh, wow, that's small.
Very small. If you have a beautiful native park here and a great pollinator garden over there, but they are physically separated by 5 miles of hot concrete and chemically treated golf courses, that bee population is totally isolated.
They are stranded on an island.
And genetic isolation inevitably leads to inbreeding, disease susceptibility, and population weakness. But if we deliberately create those corridors of resistance, that neighbor-to-neighbor, yard-to-yard connection, we build a biological highway.
The bees can actually move.
They can move freely, they can find new diverse mates, they can discover new food sources when theirs dry up.
That really is participation in ecosystem restoration. And honestly, it changes the human culture around it, too. When children grow up seeing bees and caterpillars as neighbors rather than scary things that need to be swatted or sprayed, stewardship just becomes normalized.
It completely shifts the cultural baseline. And we really need to embrace a new aesthetic to make this work. For decades, we have been aggressively sold a very specific aesthetic of neatness.
The flawless green carpet.
The flawless green carpet, not a leaf out of place. We need to transition to the aesthetic of life. And the aesthetic of life is a little messier. It's a little wilder. It's a lot buzzier. It means there are holes chewed in the leaves of your plants because a native caterpillar was eating them.
And if a caterpillar ate your leaf, that means you have a butterfly tomorrow.
Or, crucially, you have baby bird food. We forget this part. Birds feed their babies almost exclusively on soft caterpillars. Seeds won't work for hatchlings.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. No native plants means no native caterpillars. No caterpillars means the baby birds starve. If you want a yard full of songbirds, you absolutely need a yard full of bugs.
It all comes roaring back to the architecture. The invisible chemical and physical architecture we talked about at the very start of the show.
It always does. It is a single, deeply interconnected system. You pull one thread, and the whole tapestry moves.
So we've journeyed all the way from the invisible fading scent trails in the sky, down through the toxic chemical runoff in our local water, deep into the microscopic fungal trade networks of the soil, and finally back up to the massive regenerative potential of our own backyards.
It is a massive, full loop, and I really think it justifies the credit we gave at the start. Digesting this perspective from Echoes from the Edge with the lone wolf really forces you to step back and see the connections.
That's mandatory reading.
It is. It shifts the paradigm from just save the bees to something much bigger. It's save the architecture.
As we finally wrap this deep dive up, I want to go back to that specific word from earlier, threshold. We are at a decision point.
We truly are. The total collapse of these systems is absolutely not inevitable. It feels incredibly overwhelming because the problem is deeply structural. But structures can be renovated.
They can be rebuilt.
The margin for survival still exists out there. But it requires exactly what the source material calls deliberate stewardship. We have to actively choose to step back from the efficiency at all cost model and reintegrate ourselves with the biological reality of the planet.
It really reminds me of the idea that doing nothing is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. Just leaving the fallen leaves on the ground in the autumn instead of bagging them up and shipping them to a landfill. Just leaving the early weeds in the spring.
Sometimes the absolute best action is restraint, letting nature do what it knows how to do.
I want to leave everyone listening with a final provocative thought to chew on. Building off our source material today, we naturally spend so much of our time and anxiety looking at the degradation.
It's hard not to.
The brown spots on the map, the dying hives, the collapsing populations, the endless bad news. But the ecosystem changes in both directions.
That is the hope we have to hold on to. Every single untreated square foot of land, every native flower planted, is a tangible signal sent to the living world that partnership is still possible. Nature is just waiting for us to stop fighting it.
And think about the legacy of that soil we talked about, the topsoil we build today by making these small changes. That is the literal foundation for whoever lives here 100 years from now.
It outlasts all of us.
So here's the question for you to mull over as you look out your window today or as you walk through your neighborhood. If your garden or your local park is infrastructure, what is it actually building? Is it a wall that keeps the wild world out, or is it a bridge that invites it back in?
That is exactly the right question.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
Take care, everyone.